as 68-year-old Irene Tahailam Boris walked up the front steps of a Greek Orthodox church in Briarwood, Queens. In April 2024, a young man suddenly stepped in front of her and shoved her, causing her to fall backwards. Tahailam Boris struck her head on the pavement and suffered a fractured skull and brain bleeding. Her attacker rifled through her pockets and fled the scene in her vehicle. The suspect, Javon Prince, had a lengthy history of run-ins with the police. In addition to the attack on Tahailam Boris, he was wanted in connection with the theft of a 50-year-old woman's car 3 days earlier. During the prior robbery, Prince allegedly followed the victim from an ATM, cornered her in an elevator, and threatened her into handing over her wallet and car keys. At the time of his arrest for this and the assault on Tahailam Boris, he was wanted for another robbery that had taken place a few months earlier. In the fall of 2023, Prince was arrested on suspicion of 6 robberies that took place over a 2-month period in Queens. Later that year and in early 2024, he was accused of 2 separate assaults. He faces felony charges in connection with 5 violent crimes, including robbery, assault, and grand larceny, and is currently being detained as he awaits the outcomes of his cases. Both the Tahailam Boris family and police officials were outraged that the repeat offender was free to attack the elderly churchgoer. In a statement, Irene's relatives blamed New York State's bail reform laws, which make it impossible for authorities to hold suspects in custody for most crimes. They are among many who are demanding changes to the law which would allow more options for detaining suspects, but so far, nothing has changed. Number 17. Lanu Moore. In April 2023, an intruder entered the Manhattan apartment of 57-year-old Jackie Bellini, breaking the victim's arm as he forced his way inside at 1:30 in the morning. Identified by police as Bellini's neighbor, 31-year-old Lanu Moore, the suspects allegedly attacked the woman and 2 of her family members at the Washington Heights residence. Moore was charged with assault and attempted burglary. The prosecution urged the judge to set bail at $15,000 cash or $30,000 partially secured bond, but the judge imposed $5,000 cash or partially secured bond, enabling Moore to secure his freedom for as little as $500. He was released, leaving Bellini living in fear. Less than 6 months later, Bellini and her friend, 42-year-old LaVaughn Harvin, were gunned down in cold blood by a masked man while walking Bellini's pit bull Zeus near her apartment building. The gunman also fatally shot the dog. Not long after the disturbing double murder, police officials named Moore as the suspect. An anonymous source who lives in the same building told the New York Post that the killing stemmed from an ongoing dispute between Bellini and Moore over Zeus. According to neighbors, Bellini had asked Harvin to join her on Zeus's walks because she was scared of Moore. The accused killer is now facing 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon, and 1 count each of animal cruelty and aggravated criminal contempt. Moore remains held without bail at Rikers Island while awaiting trial. Number 16. Jalen Lobley. While responding to a suspicious vehicle call in Memphis, Tennessee early one morning in April 2024, 26-year-old officer Joseph McKinney and 2 of his colleagues got into a shootout with 18-year-old Jalen Lobley. McKinney and Lobley were both struck by bullets and died from their injuries, while the other officers suffered non-fatal gunshot wounds. Lobley shot the officers using a Glock switch, which converted his semi-automatic weapon into a fully automatic submachine gun. Just a month earlier, a Shelby County judge had released Lobley without bail following his arrest for possessing a Glock switch and stealing 2 cars. He was facing 2 weapon-related charges, along with 2 counts each of motor vehicle theft and vandalism, and was also facing federal gun charges. In a statement following the deadly shootout, Shelby County District Attorney Steve Mulroy said that his office had argued against Lobley's bail being lowered in his previous cases because the defendant was a danger to society. Unfortunately, these pleas to keep the defendant locked up fell on deaf ears, and now 2 men are dead. Number 15. Arion Berryman. In February 2018, police responded to the sound of gunfire at an apartment complex in Memphis, Tennessee. They arrived to find an entire building engulfed in flames and a young man running from the scene. Later identified as 18-year-old Arion Berryman, the suspect was captured after a brief foot chase. Inside the burning building, firefighters found the bodies of 34-year-old Brandon and 33-year-old Regina Allen, who had been fatally shot. The fire completely or partially destroyed at least half the apartments in the building, with damages estimated at $254,000 plus $76,000 for the contents within the units. Berryman allegedly admitted to killing and robbing the couple, then setting their home ablaze. At the time of his arrest, he was reportedly in possession of 2 guns, including an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle, several stolen cell phones, marijuana, ecstasy, prescription pill bottles, and a container of lighter fluid. The teen was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, especially aggravated robbery, aggravated arson, possession of marijuana with the intent to manufacture or sell, and possession of ecstasy with the intent to manufacture or sell. Speaking with Action 5 News shortly after the senseless tragedy, Brandon Allen's father, DJ Hewlett, said it was possible that his son knew the killer. Hewlett also said he forgave the shooter for his heinous actions. Berryman was indicted on the charges in April 2019. Jail records show that he remains in custody at the Shelby County Jail while awaiting his next court date. Number 14. Austin James Vincent. In a shocking act of violence that was captured on camera in August 2019, a man could be seen attacking 26-year-old Panise Kosarian outside her condo building in San Francisco. In the video, the suspect could be seen throwing Kosarian to the ground while in the throes of what would later be described as a methamphetamine-induced delusion that he was trying to save the woman from evil robots. Police arrested a 25-year-old homeless man named Austin James Vincent in connection with the unprovoked assault. He was charged with false imprisonment, attempted robbery, and 2 counts of battery. Much to the public's outrage, Judge Christine Van Aken ordered the court to release the defendant from custody. She hadn't seen the video of the assault, but a lot of people still weren't happy with the decisions she made after viewing it. After seeing the footage, Von Aken ordered Vincent to be placed on an ankle monitor and relocated to temporary housing for people with criminal cases, where he would remain under supervision. The decision fell in line with the judge's belief that incarceration is not always the answer, especially in cases involving defendants who struggle with mental illness and addiction. But Von Aken's compassion wasn't well received by the victim or the growing number of civilians who were becoming tired of seeing defendants who were accused of violent crimes being turned loose by the court. Shortly after Vincent's release on GPS monitoring, he was hit with 9 additional charges in connection with a previous armed assault on a group of people who were waiting for an Uber outside a restaurant. The victims claimed that they ran to their Uber while Vincent tried to assault them with a knife, which was why nobody was at the scene when responding officers arrived. Prosecutors dropped the charges stemming from the assault outside a restaurant after Vincent proved that he wasn't in the area at the time of the incident, but the charges relating to the attack against Kosarian remained in place, and Vincent was remanded to jail a few weeks after his release on ankle monitor. Unfortunately, updates have not been forthcoming despite the initial widespread public interest generated by the case. Number 13. Jonathan Cole. 22-year-old Kylie Watts was walking in North Hollywood, California in October of 2022 when a homeless man stabbed her in the back of the head with a pair of 4-inch garden shears in broad daylight. Unaware that the shears were still lodged in her skull, she immediately ran to a nearby restaurant where she collapsed on the floor and asked for help. Watts FaceTimed her mother while waiting for emergency responders to arrive, saying, "Mom, this is serious. I've been stabbed." Doctors were forced to leave a shattered bone fragment in place due to its close proximity to a major blood vessel. Thankfully, Watts survived, but she suffered a traumatic brain injury and was left to pay her medical bills out of pocket after being laid off from her job following the attack. Despite her newfound hardships and the long road to recovery she faced, the young woman harbored no anger toward her accused attacker, 30-year-old Jonathan Cole. Instead, Watts blamed the systemic failures that have led to people with untreated mental illness committing these types of crimes. Cole was charged with attempted murder and 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon. He was detained in lieu of more than $3 million bail. The suspect was accused of assaulting a couple at a bus stop immediately after the attack on Watts. According to the victims, he threw a jar of pickles at a woman when she refused to give him a light. The woman's boyfriend chased Cole down and detained him until police arrived. Records show that Cole remains detained at the Los Angeles County Jail while awaiting the outcome of his case. Number 12. Edgar Wilson. In early May of 2022, NYPD officers arrested 35-year-old Edgar Wilson for allegedly punching a 77-year-old man in the Bronx in broad daylight. Disturbing footage of the assault showed the suspect attacking the victim, who was walking with a cane during a verbal dispute. Wilson, who lived just a few blocks away from the crime scene, was charged with attempted robbery and assault. According to law enforcement, he punched the victim in the face, knocking him to the ground, threw a drink at the senior citizen's head, and then stomped on the man's face. The victim reportedly told police that his attacker tried to rob him, but nothing was taken. By the time officers arrived, Wilson had fled the scene. The victim was taken to the hospital for his injuries. In the meantime, the NYPD put out a notice and released the footage along with an appeal for information about the suspect, who was identified and arrested several days later. Number 11. Tenzin Norgyal and Karma Tsering. 2 accused street rivals in Queens, New York, showed no concern for the safety of innocent civilians when a confrontation between them erupted in gunfire in June of 2022. Later identified as 28-year-old Tenzin Norgyal and 21-year-old Karma Tsering, the men exchanged heated words and gunfire at a busy intersection in the borough's Woodside neighborhood in broad daylight. According to police, the 2 suspects knew each other, but the gunfight seemed to result from a chance encounter. Norgyal, a suspected member of the TNT street gang, took a bullet to the shoulder and went to the hospital, where he received treatment and was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. He was convicted of 2 counts of robbery and is serving a 15-year sentence in state prison. Tsering fled the scene in an Audi and remained at large for 4 months until his capture in October of 2022. He was charged with assault, attempted criminally negligent homicide, and other crimes. Records show that he's serving a 3.5-year prison sentence for criminal possession of a weapon with an earliest possible release date in 2026. Number 10. Jesus Alejandro Rivas Figueroa. In what law enforcement described as a robbery gone wrong in Manhattan's world-famous Times Square, a teenage Venezuelan immigrant allegedly opened fire inside a store when a security guard caught him and 2 others trying to shoplift in February 2024. Jesus Alejandro Rivas Figueroa was identified by police as the gunman responsible for shooting a 38-year-old Brazilian tourist who was nothing more than an innocent bystander during the violence. The victim, Tatael Ribeiro, was text messaging her husband and waiting in line to pay for sneakers when a bullet from the .45 caliber weapon struck her in the leg. She crawled to the back of the store in an attempt to reach safety while the chaotic scene unfolded. Ribeiro received 13 stitches but thankfully survived her injury. In addition to shooting a tourist, Rivas Figueroa is accused of firing repeatedly at a police officer as he fled the scene. The officer grabbed his service weapon in preparation to defend himself, only to realize that there were too many people around for him to safely fire back without risking harm to innocent civilians. Rivas Figueroa was tracked to a relative's home in nearby Yonkers, where U.S. Marshals arrested him a few days after the shooting. Prosecutors claimed that the accused shooter and his family promptly left the shelter where they were staying and fled the city immediately following the crime. The teen could be seen crying as he was handcuffed, and Perp walked to a waiting vehicle, and the 2 other suspects were also captured and charged. A police spokesperson said that Rivas Figueroa will most likely face a charge of attempted murder of a police officer. According to the most recent available updates on the case, he's being held without bail as he awaits trial. Number 9. Elijah Elizabeth Holmes. 18-year-old Amaya Page was unexpectedly shot multiple times on New Year's Eve in 2022 while walking in the city of York, Pennsylvania. At about midnight, she was rushed to a nearby hospital where she died from her injuries while police worked to identify a suspect. According to investigators, 29-year-old Elijah Elizabeth Holmes fired the deadly bullet from a passing U-Haul van. Charging documents state that the vehicle was driven by a man named Jordan Mongold, who received a text message from Holmes asking him to drive her to a planned fight. Witnesses told police that the shooter was wearing a mask, but they still recognized what they could see of her face and identified her as Holmes. Prosecutors do not believe Page was the intended target of the gunfire, but that she just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mongold sped off after the shooting and was pulled over about an hour later. He said he didn't see who fired the fatal bullet, but he admitted to hearing the gunshot. Holmes rang from Mongold's van and turned herself in about a week later. She was charged with criminal homicide and attempted first-degree murder. The status of the case is unclear. Number 8. The murder of Claudia Cuarte. Teenager Claudia Cuarte was sitting in the back seat of a car in the Queens neighborhood of St. Albans when she was shot in the head in May of 2023. She died from her injuries the next day, and police set out to identify and locate the 3 masked suspects who were seen fleeing the scene on foot. According to police, Cuarte had just settled a dispute with other girls when the suspects fired their guns in what appeared to be a gang-related incident. These findings came as a shock to Cuarte's family, who did not know the young woman to be involved in any gang or criminal activity. Detectives were still at a loss to identify the suspects when they released surveillance footage about a month after the shooting in hopes that someone would come forward with helpful information. The NYP offered a $10,000 reward, but unfortunately, Cuarte's killers remain at large. Number 7. Dion Kirkland. A New York City woman accidentally ran over another woman's foot while riding a bicycle at a party in August 2022 and paid for it with her life, according to the police. The victim, 44-year-old Tarsia Tani McLean Lyceus, was shot in the head at around 5 o'clock in the morning at the Hearts of Love event in Brooklyn's East New York neighborhood. The 2 women didn't know each other before the shooting, according to police. A few weeks later, authorities arrested the suspected shooter, 44-year-old Dion Kirkland, on suspicion of second-degree murder. Kirkland allegedly denied killing Lyceus when questioned by detectives. During her first court hearing, prosecutors accused her of opening fire on the victim in retaliation for Lyceus wielding a glass bottle at her. The state claimed that Lyceus was trying to retreat while Kirkland chased after her with the gun, struck her on the head with it, and then pulled the trigger. Prosecutors also pointed out Kirkland's extensive criminal record, which includes 2 prior felony convictions and 9 misdemeanors. And while this marked her first arrest since 2008, her probation has been revoked twice over the years. Records show that Kirkland is being held without bail at Rikers Island as she awaits trial, while it's been speculated that she may try to fight for her innocence on the basis of self-defense. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 6. The killing of Catherine Steinler. 32-year-old Catherine Kate Steinler and her family were walking along San Francisco's famous Pier 14 in July of 2015 when a single bullet pierced her back without warning. She was rushed to the hospital but died from her injuries 2 hours later. Police caught up with the accused shooter, Jose Inez Garcia Zarate, about an hour after the shooting. In the meantime, divers recovered the weapon from the bay. It had recently been stolen from park ranger John Wojciechowski's personal vehicle while he was out at dinner. Garcia Zarate claimed that he had found the gun wrapped in cloth just moments before it fired, and that he accidentally discharged it when he picked it up. In a jailhouse interview with local station KGO TV, he also claimed that he had taken some sleeping pills that he found in a dumpster shortly before he began wandering the pier that day. The case sparked widespread controversy, especially when people began learning about the suspect's extensive criminal record. Garcia Zarate already had 7 felony convictions before the shooting and had been deported from the US a handful of times. He faced numerous charges in connection with Kate Steinler's death, including first-degree murder, drug possession, and being a felon in possession of a weapon, but he insisted that the shooting was accidental. Members of the public were already angry that an illegal immigrant with an extensive rap sheet even had the opportunity to shoot someone on US soil, but Americans were even more infuriated when Garcia Zarate was acquitted of Steinler's murder. He still faced federal charges in connection with the shooting, but the case faced continued delays as he was deemed mentally incompetent to stand trial. Garcia Zarate was ultimately convicted of federal gun charges, and in 2024, he was slated for deportation. Number 5. Morgan State shooting. Students were gathered inside the campus dining hall at Morgan State University in Maryland in October 2023 when bullets suddenly began spraying into the crowd. It was homecoming week, and the students had just crowned their Mr. and Miss Morgan State University. They were about to head to the Student Center for a coronation ball when the shooting began, causing the crowd to disperse in a panic. 5 people between the ages of 18 and 22 were shot, including at least 4 students, and they all thankfully survived. Those who were in attendance at the time of the shooting spent hours sheltering in place under the orders of local and school authorities, while SWAT team members searched for suspects. The officers went door to door, searching dorm rooms for weapons and asking the occupants if they had seen anything. According to city officials, there were believed to be 3 gunmen at the scene. 2 have been arrested, including 18-year-old Jovan Terrell Williams, aka Chewy, and another teenager. Williams, who was captured more than a month after the shooting, faces multiple charges including attempted first-degree murder. At the time of his arrest, he was already wanted in connection with an unrelated gun and drug conspiracy case. The shooting marked the 3rd year that the university's homecoming activities were affected by violence. Students were also shot at homecoming events in 2021 and 2022. Following the most recent shooting, the college has ramped up its security measures in an effort to prevent history from repeating itself yet again. In the meantime, the suspects' cases remain ongoing. Number 4. Dennis Coraz. Just days after Christmas in 2021, police were called to the scene of an early morning robbery in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They were met by Dennis Coraz, who claimed that he and his ex-girlfriend, Amanda Ducharme, had been robbed and assaulted by a stranger who threw a brick at him and demanded $3,000. According to Coraz, Ducharme tried to fight off the thief and yelled for him to save himself, prompting him to run and call the police. But the story didn't add up. Coraz lacked injuries that would have been consistent with being attacked with a brick, and Ducharme had an open domestic violence case against him in criminal court at the time. According to court documents, Ducharme was afraid of Coraz. While investigating the supposed robbery, police found her dead in her apartment with severe head lacerations and blunt force injuries. Ducharme had also been strangled with an electric cord. During questioning, Coraz allegedly admitted that he made up the story about the robbery. He insisted that Ducharme had asked him to kill her after falling and hitting her head, and that he essentially finished her off as an act of mercy because she was suffering. Unswayed by Coraz's claims, authorities charged him with murder. In early 2024, he was found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide and sentenced to life in prison. Number 3. Michelle McKelly. A 42-year-old homeless New York City resident named Michelle McKelly had 96 prior arrests on her record. When she was arrested, in February 2022 for stealing from a Target store on Manhattan's Upper East Side. At the time, the self-described professional booster was out on supervised release, and she was freed yet again after her 97th arrest. This time, the judge threatened to issue a warrant for McKelly's arrest if she continued to miss court dates, which was also an ongoing issue. Most of McKelly's prior charges were for petty larceny, which is a misdemeanor in New York State. Under the state's bail reform laws, judges have no choice but to let suspects go for most crimes, even if the defendant continues to offend. Despite the judge's warning, McKelly racked up at least 12 more arrests, including for stealing $1,375 worth of products from a Rite Aid store and also hitting another Target store. She pleaded guilty to petty larceny and disorderly conduct and was ordered to attend a program for repeat offenders. The seemingly light sentence didn't sit well with some people, including members of law enforcement, who have cited McKelly's case as a clear example of how rehabilitative alternatives to jail just don't work for some people. People were even more outraged to learn that the judge congratulated McKelly for taking some of the bare minimum steps that were expected of her. Updates on McKelly's situation have remained scarce. In May of 2023, an entry in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, or NamUs, listed an unclaimed body under the name Michelle McKelly. The body was found in Manhattan, in an area McKelly was known to frequent, but it's unclear whether it's the same Michelle McKelly who became infamous for her professional boosting skills. Today's topic was inspired by Daylon Javier 6328. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Jesse Leonardo Otero. In December 2023, a serial shoplifter in California's Bay Area named Jesse Leonardo Otero made news headlines for surpassing his 90th arrest. Based on his record, it's clear that the 44-year-old homeless man is an opportunist who doesn't discriminate between targets, including individuals, big-name companies, and mom-and-pop stores. Some store owners told local station KRON4 that Otero has a history of stealing hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise from their business at a time. One store manager said that she called the police on Otero more than 20 times, but he remained undeterred. Some might say that repeat offenders like Otero tend to reoffend because they are almost never sentenced to jail time or even held in custody on theft charges. His history of being released over and over after being detained for just days at a time proves that this is most likely true. Others have pointed out that some repeat offenders, including Otero, are caught up in a vicious cycle due to untreated addiction and mental health issues. Otero was released just hours after his December 2023 arrest. If you thought these cities couldn't get chaotic enough, then find out about the absurdity that can occur when malls go wrong. Coming up for you right after number 1. Number 1. Alvin Charles. A 43-year-old homeless New York City resident named Alvin Charles was already on supervised release for an ongoing criminal case when he was arrested for fatally stabbing 43-year-old Tommy Bailey on a subway train in September 2022. Officers arrived at the scene to find the victim suffering from stab wounds to the head, back, neck, and torso. Bailey was rushed to the hospital where he was pronounced dead on arrival. At the time, Charles was facing an unrelated pending attempted murder charge. Prosecutors urged the judge to set bail at $50,000 in the prior case, which also stemmed from an incident that occurred on the subway. But Charles was released on community supervision. Many people blamed the judge's decision to free him on the fact that he was even able to commit another crime. According to authorities, Charles and Bailey didn't know each other prior to the deadly subway stabbing. This time, thankfully, Charles's public defender failed to convince the judge to release him on bail. Records show that he remains held at Rikers Island as he awaits trial. 29-year-old Michael Ugwa was with a friend at the food court of the Lakeside Shopping Centre in Essex, England, on April the 28th of 2022. The two men walked past a group composed of East London men, Mohammed Khan and Brandon Luchman Singh, as well as the latter's girlfriend, Shannon Weston. Ugwa allegedly directed a flirtatious comment towards Weston, prompting Khan and Luchman Singh to chase him around the food court. More security footage showed Ugwa defending himself with cheers. Eventually, he was cornered and overpowered by Khan, who delivered a single and deadly blow to his chest with a flick knife. Khan and his companions subsequently fled the scene, leaving Ugwa, a father of 3, to die from catastrophic blood loss. The trio of suspects remained on the run for the next few days, but were finally apprehended on May the 4th. Khan maintained that he'd acted in self-defense, which was discredited by the CCTV footage and eyewitnesses who'd been in the busy food court at the time of the incident. Following a trial at Basildon Crown Court in May of 2023, Khan was found guilty of murder and was later jailed for life as punishment. Meanwhile, Luchman Singh was convicted of manslaughter and affray and was sentenced to 13 years in prison. For allegedly helping the 2 men evade police in the days following the attack, Weston was found guilty of 3 counts of assisting an offender. She was given a suspended 2-year sentence and was ordered to perform 200 hours of unpaid work. Number 17. Mexican Mall Collapse. On October the 11th of 2018, a newly constructed shopping center in the Mexican city of Monterrey collapsed, killing several people and leaving others missing. The 3-story structure, located in the northern industrial hub of Nuevo León state, was reportedly being worked on without the requisite license. According to local council secretary Genaro Garcia, the concrete slabs holding the mall in place pancaked and fell on top of one another. Roughly 150 emergency personnel were dispatched to the scene for the ensuing rescue effort, which was documented by civil defense officials. The chilling images showed rescuers pulling wounded victims from the rubble. In subsequent reports, the death toll was estimated to be at least 7, while 15 others were injured and 9 were reported missing in the immediate aftermath. All of the victims, according to Mexican officials, were construction workers rather than mall goers. The tragedy unfolded on the heels of yet another mall collapse just a few months earlier, in July of 2018. The so-called Arts Pedregal, which opened on the south side of Mexico City back in March, partially collapsed after a support beam failed. Fortunately, the mall was successfully evacuated and no casualties were reported. Number 16. Copenhagen Mall Shooting. Danish law enforcement received reports of shots fired at a mall in a developing city area of Copenhagen on the evening of July the 3rd of 2022. According to eyewitnesses, a male suspect armed with a rifle and a knife walked into the Fields shopping mall sometime before 5:30 p.m. The man was reportedly behaving in a violent and angry manner. As he ran through the mall shouting, allegedly believing that the shoppers were zombies, he began shooting indiscriminately, killing 3 and critically wounding 4. Another 23 people sustained minor injuries. 11 minutes after the attack was reported to the police, the suspect was neutralized and taken into custody. Although his name wasn't released, he was described as a 22-year-old with a history of contact with the psychiatric healthcare system. Prior to the shooting, the suspect had reportedly uploaded videos to social media in which he exhibited alarmingly erratic behavior and indicated that a certain type of psychiatric medicine wasn't working for him. In the videos, a gun safe could be seen in the background. It would later emerge that the weapons used in the mass shooting belonged to an individual living in the same house as the suspect. The shooter was charged with 3 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. During a hearing the day after his arrest, he was remanded to a closed psychiatric facility where he remained until his trial in June of the following year. He was ultimately found guilty on all charges and in July of 2023 was sentenced to detention in a secure medical facility. Number 15. Hong Kong Mall Stabbing. On June the 2nd of 2023, a 39-year-old man went berserk at the Plaza Hollywood Mall, located in the Diamond Hill area of Kowloon, Hong Kong, as shown in graphic video clips posted to social media in the aftermath. The suspect attacked a pair of young women with a 12-inch knife in broad daylight. He initially pinned one of the victims to the ground and repeatedly stabbed her, at which point her friend rushed to her aid. Although it wasn't shown in the harrowing footage, the attacker eventually stabbed the friend as well. The victims, aged 22 and 26, were subsequently taken to the hospital, where they were both pronounced dead. According to the local police senior superintendent, The unidentified man had purchased the knife in the same mall shortly before launching the brutal attack on the two women, whom he reportedly didn't know. The suspect, described as a homeless man with a history of mental illness, was arrested on murder charges. The city's leader, Chief Executive John Lee, released a statement offering his condolences to the victims' families, while urging members of the public to stop sharing videos of the stabbing online. Number 14. Green Hills hostage situation. 40-year-old Archie Perret worked as a security guard at the Green Hills shopping mall complex in the Green Hills neighborhood of Metro Manila, the Philippines. During the late winter of 2020, Perret expressed his belief that he was the victim of unjust termination on the part of the mall security agency, Safeguard Armor Security Corporation, or SASCOR. Company officials would later challenge the man's claims, disputing that he was ever fired. According to SASCOR, Perret was supposed to be reassigned to a different location as part of the company's rotation of security guards. Nevertheless, Perret became extremely disgruntled, and on March the 2nd, his displeasure towards his employers boiled over into a hostage situation. Armed with a .45 caliber handgun, the man entered the employee's entrance of the Vera Mall and shot the guard on duty. The victim was rushed to the hospital as Perret took several people hostage in the finance office. Within minutes, the city's police chief, a SWAT team, and other authorities arrived at the mall. As the hostage crisis unfolded, Perret maintained contact with officials and the local press through his cell phone and walkie-talkie. His first demand was for all of the mall security guards to congregate outside the complex. The mall was subsequently placed under lockdown as Perret threatened to shoot his hostages if his demands weren't fulfilled. Authorities set up a press conference per the suspect's wishes. Additionally, 6 SASCOR officials announced their plans to resign in an attempt to placate Perret. The latter went on to demand that his bosses eat 2,500 Philippine pesos on live TV, but relented on the condition that the police publicly plead with him not to force the act. Roughly 7 hours after the mall was placed on lockdown, the hostages were freed. Perret subsequently aired his grievances against SASCOR on national television before being tackled by a bystander and taken into police custody. All of the hostages were unharmed, and the security guard whom Perret shot at the onset of the incident ultimately survived. Number 13. Stalowa Wola Mall knife attack. A knife-wielding assailant went on a rampage at the Vivo Mall in the Polish town of Stalowa Wola on October the 20th of 2017. The 27-year-old knife man, whose identity wasn't immediately disclosed to the public, reportedly began attacking people from behind at random. He stabbed several people in the back before being detained by shoppers and eventually turned over to the police. The suspect was said to have been in an emotional state upon being apprehended and was unable to explain his motives for the violent outburst. The local police chief later attributed the attack to the man's poor psychological condition. Medical documents recovered from his residence would reveal that he'd previously received psychiatric treatment. 8 victims were hospitalized in the wake of the incident, while 1 other person suffered minor injuries and another was treated for shock at the scene. A 50-year-old woman who was stabbed ultimately succumbed to her injuries and was reported as the only death stemming from the mass stabbing. Number 12. Sydney robbery. During April and May of 2019, a pair of Australian teenagers carried out a string of robberies in Sydney's southwest. One of the incidents, which was captured on video, occurred at a shopping mall in the city of Casula. One of the teen boys, who was among a gang of youths, was shown knocking an 81-year-old woman to the ground as the robbery unfolded. The group had reportedly been eyeing cell phones and watches before being asked to leave the store. Although they initially ignored the request, they eventually left with a stolen timepiece. They also allegedly tried swiping a phone but dropped it as they made their escape. The elderly woman needed to be taken to the hospital after suffering a broken pelvis in the altercation. The 15-year-old, accused of being at the center of the series of distraction-style robberies, also accosted a man outside the Auburn railway station in April and stole 3 laptops from a Maryland store in May. A pair of search warrants were executed at the 15-year-old's residence, as well as that of his 14-year-old accomplice. They faced a number of criminal charges, including 2 counts of robbery in company and 1 of recklessly causing grievous bodily harm. Number 11. Columbus Mall stabbing. On March the 26th of 2023, 2 Ohio teens got into a violent altercation near a strip mall in East Columbus that ultimately turned deadly. According to local police, 18-year-old Brianna Barozzini started arguing with 17-year-old Halia Culbertson inside one of the stores at the mall. The dispute eventually escalated once the girls went outside, where Barozzini allegedly pulled out a knife and swung it at Culbertson. The latter was subsequently taken to a hospital but ultimately died from a single stab wound. Barozzini fled the scene but was tracked down at her home a short time later. She was arrested on a murder charge before being released on a $750,000 bond. During a court appearance 2 days after the incident, the suspect's attorneys claimed that she acted in self-defense during the deadly fight but neglected to go into further detail in support of those claims. Number 10. Long Island Mall Brawl. A viral cell phone video captured a violent brawl that occurred outside the Green Acres Mall in Valley Stream, Long Island, on April the 26th of 2015. 2 women reportedly got into an argument over a parking space, which eventually devolved into a physical altercation. The dispute was sparked after a 49-year-old woman tried parking in a spot outside the mall before realizing that a man was holding the space for someone else. On her way into the shopping center, the 49-year-old shared a verbal exchange with the woman who ultimately took the original parking spot. Eventually, the 2 women came to blows in the middle of the lot as the second woman's husband encouraged her to bust the other's face. A group of onlookers observed the fight before someone stepped in to separate the brawlers. In the immediate aftermath, no arrests were made in connection with the incident, but Nassau County investigators were soliciting help from the general public in their efforts to identify the parties involved. Number 9. Allen Mall shooting. On the afternoon of May the 6th of 2023, Mauricio Martinez Garcia exited a silver sedan outside Allen Premium Outlets in Allen, Texas. The 33-year-old man, who was wearing black tactical gear and armed with an AR-15 style rifle, opened fire on a crowd outside the mall, shooting 15 people over the course of the next 3 to 4 minutes. Garcia fired dozens of rounds indiscriminately as fleeing mall goers alerted others of the situation and helped shelter people in the back rooms of stores. About 45 minutes after the shooting began, the Allen Police Department sent out a tweet indicating that officers were at the scene. According to the local police chief, an officer who was at the mall on an unrelated call when the gunfire broke out engaged and killed Garcia. Law enforcement recovered a total of 8 firearms from the latter's person and vehicle, all of which had reportedly been purchased legally. In the aftermath, it was reported that a military veteran had attempted to perform CPR on 3 of the wounded victims, many of whom needed to be rushed to the hospital. Because of their critical condition, the death toll eventually reached 9, including the shooter himself, while 7 others were injured. Garcia, who'd been living in a hotel in northeast Dallas, had worked as a security guard for at least 3 different companies in the years leading up to the incident. Although he had no criminal history, he was previously removed from U.S. Army basic training for concerns about his mental health. He was said to have possessed extreme political beliefs and reportedly wore a patch with the insignia RWDS for Right-Wing Death Squad during the massacre. On June the 26th, the unnamed officer who neutralized Garcia was cleared of any wrongdoing by a grand jury. Number 8. Nakia Killick. Nakia Killick was celebrating her birthday along with her family at the Oasis shopping centre in Gold Coast, Australia, on June the 26th of 2016. They were on an escalator over 30 feet high from the base floor when Killick slipped and fell over, impacting the floor head first. Shoppers rushed to help her and called the emergency services. The 29-year-old woman was taken to the hospital unconscious and placed in the intensive care unit, where she remained for the following 6 days. Doctors reported that she was battling severe swelling and bleeding on her brain, in addition to fractures to her eye sockets, cheekbones, ribs, and a shattered pelvis. Medics had to surgically insert a filter to help prevent blood clots, and when she awoke from her coma, Killick was confined to a wheelchair, unable to walk or talk. Her family and friends started a fundraising campaign to cover her medical bills and managed to gather over $10,000 from donations. Number 7. Jacob Bergquist and Mary Alice Scarborough. On October the 25th of 2021, a man with multiple firearms in his possession entered the Boise Town Square shopping mall in Idaho. Chaos ensued as he then opened fire, wounding at least 4 people and killing 2 others, before ultimately being neutralized by the police. The gunman was identified as 27-year-old Jacob Bergquist, and following the exchange of gunfire with law enforcement, he was taken to a local hospital where he later passed away. Navy veteran Joe Acker, a 26-year-old transgender woman who worked as a security guard, died in the shooting while trying to protect shoppers and stop the attacker. The other deceased victim was named as Roberto Padilla Arguelles from Rupert, who had been out shopping at the mall according to his grieving family. Further disturbing revelations emerged in the mass shooting's aftermath. A 54-year-old woman, later identified as Mary Alice Scarborough, approached Acker as she lay dying and stole her rings, a gun belt, and other items she had on her person. The theft unfolded as the police were actively dealing with the shooting. The woman was arrested and charged with destruction, alteration or concealment of evidence, as well as malicious injury to property and theft. A police spokesman said Scarborough was experiencing a mental health crisis at the time. Number 6. Bailey LaColst and Amber Giordano. On September the 19th of 2016, an officer working a detail at the mall in Rockingham Park, Virginia, was called to check on 2 women who appeared to be intoxicated and were acting erratic in the parking lot. They both had their children reported as being 1 month and 4 months old with them. When police found the women, subsequently identified as 22-year-old Bailey LaColst and Amber Giordano, aged 24, they were barely able to stand. One of them was reportedly lying in a puddle, holding her baby above her head. Both women were taken into custody along with their infants and charged with endangering the welfare of a child. LaColst and Giordano were later released on bail, but their children were temporarily placed in the custody of family members, pending an examination of the case by juvenile investigators. Number 5. Tamara Nisha Burden. On February the 13th of 2015, Tamara Nisha Burden, aged 25, was in the bathroom of the Georgia Square Mall when a young girl and her teenage sister entered the restroom. One of the girls hung up her purse while she used the facilities but forgot to take it back before exiting the room. A few moments later, the sisters came back looking for it and saw that Burden had a cell phone sticking out of her pocket identical with the one that had been in the purse. They also noticed some cash was missing. After they'd retrieved the purse and went to tell their father about the incident. The man immediately went to confront Burden, but she quickly walked into another store and entered a fitting room. A store manager was notified and he found the girl's stolen cell phone in the pocket of a pair of jeans left on display in the fitting room. The father called for a mall security guard and followed Burden around the mall until one arrived at the scene. The guard then alerted the police and an officer intercepted Burden as she was going into another store. The woman denied stealing the phone and accused the girl's father of following her. Police took statements from everyone involved and ultimately arrested the 25-year-old, charging her with theft by taking. Burden was transported to the Clark County Jail that evening and released early the next morning after paying her $1,500 bond. Number 4. Nicholas George Boak. On September the 22nd of 2021, Michael Eaton was wandering around the Cairns Central Shopping Centre in Cairns, Australia. As reported by staff, the 51-year-old was a morning regular as he'd recently separated from his wife and went to the mall daily to chat with the employees. The father of 5 was on the ground floor at around 8 a.m. before businesses had opened when he was knifed by another man. His attacker allegedly came up behind him and slashed his throat after the pair, who didn't know each other, had previously had an encounter. Local authorities determined that the second man had ranted at Eaton and then ambushed him when he didn't reply. The latter bled out for 20 minutes before dying at the scene, and ensuing investigations led the authorities to 38-year-old Australian Defence Force reservist Nicholas George Boak. He was arrested and called to court to face 1 count of murder, but did not make an immediate appearance after it was deemed that he posed a safety risk to those in attendance. His trial was ongoing as of the latest updates released to the media, which didn't offer further information on his mental health or concrete reasoning behind the attack. Number 3. Michael Warnock and Chelsea Guerra. 22-year-old Chelsea Guerra, who had been modeling nude since the age of 18 to pay for her college tuition at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, responded to a Craigslist ad placed by 64-year-old photographer Michael Warnock in April of 2017. He'd been looking for a model to shoot at the Miracle Mile shopping center in Monroeville, Pennsylvania. Guerra took him up on the offer and they decided to meet at the mall at 11 a.m. when the shopping center was busy. The model was only wearing thigh-high stockings and high-heel shoes, while posing in front of the mall in full view of shoppers walking in the area. Someone called the police, who subsequently found Guerra naked and asked the young woman to clothe herself before taking her into custody. The photographer was also arrested and initially charged with criminal solicitation, conspiracy, disorderly conduct, and narcotics possession, as officers had found medication on him for which he didn't have a prescription. Eventually, in March of 2018, Warnock pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct, and so did his model, who additionally pleaded guilty to indecent exposure. They were both ordered to pay a $300 fine. Number 2. Xiang Liu Jian. 30-year-old Xiang Liu Jian was shopping with her 2-year-old son in tow at a mall in Jingzhou, China, on July the 26th of 2015. The woman and her child were close to the top of an escalator when the landing platform collapsed as the stairs were still rolling. Li Juan managed to push her son away before falling into the moving components. Shop assistants at the top reacted quickly and succeeded in dragging the child to safety, but unfortunately, they weren't able to pull the woman away before she was swallowed by the mechanism. Liu Jian was crushed to death and her body was found hours later when firefighters finally managed to disassemble the escalator. The harrowing video of the tragedy went viral in the aftermath, with many of those commenting on it lauding Li Juan's instinct to protect her son. An investigation was launched and it emerged that the mall staff near the escalator had been sent to keep an eye on the broken mechanism, as the screws on the footplate had become loose shortly before the incident. It wasn't made immediately clear what legal repercussions, if any, the mall would face. Number 1. Boniface Rexon. 19-year-old Boniface Rexon, an alleged member of the Thugs for Life gang, went to the Brent Cross shopping centre in London to buy a knife. On May the 4th of 2021, he concealed the blade into his tracksuit bottoms and later on stumbled upon 21-year-old Gideon Nguendima. The latter was reported to have been associated with a rival gang named A9, and he was outside a JD Sports shop. The teenager went to confront Nguendima and stabbed him in the chest with the newly bought knife, piercing his heart. The victim collapsed on the floor and pleaded with shoppers passing by to call an ambulance before succumbing to the knife wound at the scene. Rexon was detained by security guards and after he was taken into police custody, dropped the knife down a drain at the station where he was detained. Investigators later retrieved the weapon and used it as evidence. The teenager was initially charged with murder but pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter, claiming he'd lost control out of fear. As a gang member, Rexon had allegedly been subjected to attacks from rivals in the past. After the trial, he was sentenced to 14 years in jail as well as 4 years on extended license. He had previous convictions for robbery as well as for possessing a lock knife and Rambo-style blade. At the time of the attack, he was on police bail on suspicion of murder. Thanks for watching. If you knew for a fact that the Chinese government was able to monitor everything you did on your cell phone and without having a viable alternative, would you continue to use that phone? Let us know in the comment section below.